Hi, everyone. Welcome to Radiator Comics Studio's new demonstration series, Hands-On. Radiator Comics Studio is a series of online programs and print publications, all designed to support and grow the cartooning community in South Florida and connect it with the national comics scene. Radiator Comics Studio is made possible with support from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, and we're grateful for their support. We are broadcasting this afternoon from Miccosukee, Tequesta, and Seminole Land. I want to acknowledge the land on which we live and work and the indigenous people who have been and continue to be caretakers of this land. The land that we live on is stolen land, and the labor that built up this land into what we know South Florida to be today was built with stolen labor, primarily from African American, Bahamian, Haitian, and other Caribbean people. It's important to keep this violence front of mind because the effects of it are very real and very current, even though our white supremacist culture tries to erase that history. I'm grateful and happy to have you here and hope you'll enjoy this first installment of Hands-On, which I've been calling a comics cooking show. And we have a number of these programs planned out. 2 weeks from today, Summer Pierre will be demonstrating her daily diary comic drawing practice. But today's presentation is how I make take my finished artwork and turn it into a mini comic or a zine. Every self-publisher has their own way of doing this. So it's important for me to point out that this is not how it is done. This is how I do it. And everyone who might even take this information will probably make adaptations to it on their own, make it their own thing. So a quick introduction about myself. My name is Neil Brideau. My pronouns are he, him, his. I've been self-publishing my own comics for a little under 20 years now, and I've made comics that have taken an afternoon to create, and I've made comics that have taken years to create. I've also performed other roles in the self-publishing community, including running Radiator Comics, which distributes self-published and small press comic books by a bunch of fantastic cartoonists. I've also helped organize some comics and zine festivals like the Chicago Zine Fest and the Chicago Alternative Comics Expo. And I worked at Quimby's Bookstore, which is an epicenter for self-published media. And I have also volunteered at a bunch of comics festivals and run a bunch of workshops for festivals, for libraries, for classrooms. So that's me in a nutshell. Thank you so much for coming today. I wanted to do a real quick comment about some terminology that I'm going to be using today. I'm going to be saying the word zine a lot, and I'm going to be saying the word comic a lot, and sometimes I'm going to interchange them. So a zine is a low-budget publication. It's usually made by a single person or a small group of people. It's usually photocopied. It's usually hand-assembled by the person or people who created the content that's inside of it. It can contain words, photographs, collage, drawings, comics, any combination of those things. So that's a zine. The term comic can have a ton of different meanings, right? But today, when I say the word comic, I either mean a piece of artwork that is sequential art, so something that you would find in a comic book, or the publication itself can be called a comic. So you could call a publication of self-published comics either a zine or a comic. So I'm going to be using those two terms, zine and comic, often to mean the same thing. So that's just a warning to you. So like I said before, there are lots of ways that you can make a zine, and there are lots of ways that I've made one. Today's presentation is going to be very much focused on making a zine or a comic without the assistance of a computer and without sending files to a printer, like a professional printer, and then them shipping 100 copies of a publication to you. Today's conversation is about very small scale self-publishing, where it's just you and your hands and some household materials that are behind me in my kitchen. And then some math, which is always fun to incorporate into your hobbies. This is my preferred method of self-publishing. If I'm left to my own devices, what I'm going to show you today is exactly how I make my zines. So let's jump in. We are actually going to start off with the hardest part completed, and that is having the artwork completed. That's your job, is to figure out like what the content of your zine is going to be. But you need that in order to like actually like put that in in the zine. So there are tons of ways that you can create your artwork for your comic. Here are some original pages that I have drawn on what's called Bristol board, which is like a thick paper. So these are ink drawings on paper. They can be the content of your zine. They will eventually be in one of my zines. There's also, you can, this is a zine that I made at a workshop run by Remus Jackson, who's a cartoonist who grew up in West Palm Beach, Florida, but now lives in Gainesville, Florida. It's missing a couple letters, but this is a zine that I started making about non-alcoholic drinks. So what they had us do at this workshop was they had us just like collage and draw directly onto some folded pages, as if you're just like making your zine as you are sitting there. So you don't have to make it independent of the object. And then here are some pages of a zine that I wrote on just printer paper, 8.5 by 11 regular printer paper. And this is a zine called Demystifying Comics. And this is all about like how to make comics making fun. So these are some original pages from this. And I actually, I wanted this to be like improvisational and fun. So I actually drew most of this on the bus to and from work. So you can make your content wherever you want. So the basic idea is, I'm going to give you a little overview, and then I'll actually show you. The basic idea is I'm going to take, the Demystifying Comics is the comic that I'm going to use today to talk about how to make a zine. So I'm going to take these original pages and I'm going to photocopy them. I'm then going to take those photocopies and I'm going to put them in what I call primary sheets. I'm going to glue them to other pieces of paper. Then I'm going to take those primary sheets, the glued up pieces of paper. I'm going to take them back to the photocopier. I'm going to photocopy those to create copies of my zine. And then I'm going to, if I need to cut the zine, I'm going to fold the pieces of paper. I'm going to bind them. And all of that will lead to having a finished zine. It's super fun. It's super easy. So let's get started. I'm going to walk over here to behind the counter. So let's talk about these originals. Maybe I've already lost something that I need. So I've got these originals. They're 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper. This is the type of paper that you're going to find in any like printer or photocopier. And I want the final zine to be known as what is known as letter digest. This is a term for an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper folded in half. And digest just means folded in half. The term letter is the type of paper that this is. So again, this is like the thing that you're going to find in most printers and photocopiers. It's called letter paper. It's 8.5 inches wide by 11 inches tall. Digest just means that you're folding it in half. So I'm going to fold this sheet of paper in half. I'm going to move this out of the way and fold this in half. Make sure that the corners are connecting. So this is the size that the final zine is going to be. This is 5.5 inches wide by 8.5 inches tall, right? Because it's an 11 by 8.5 folded in half. So now it's 5.5 by 8.5. And you'll see that it actually creates 1, 2, 3, 4 pages. So when you're making a zine, your zine is always going to be a multiple of 4 pages. So if I take a second folded sheet of 8.5 by 11 paper and nestle them in to each other, I now have an 8-page zine. And however many sheets of paper that I add, I'm going to get more pages, which are a multiple of 4. So, you know, now that's something to think about when you're making your comic or your zine, the content of your comic or zine. But if your comic or zine is like 7 pages or 13 pages, like you don't have to worry about that. That just means that you have a couple extra pages to work with that are blank. You can leave them blank. You could draw some pretty little drawings on those blank pages as decoration, or you can add bibliographic information, you know, like when it was made, where it was made, contact information on how to get in touch with you. What else? A dedication to your parents, that's always a nice thing, right? So Demystifying Comics, the zine that we're going to be working with today, is a 12-page zine. And so then with the cover, that adds another 4 pages. So that's a 16-page zine. So I need 4 sheets of paper folded in half. So I have these 2 here, and so I'm going to add 2 more. Each of these sheets has 4 pages on them, so 4 times 4 is 16. There's some math for you. Are you ready for some more math? I have this blank zine here, right? And I want to reduce these originals so that they scale down to fit onto this zine, right? So I have to figure out the percentage to reduce this original so that it fits on this zine, because its current size is way too big for this zine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide the dimensions of the photocopy that I want to make that fits onto this sheet of paper by the dimensions of the original. So if I'm reducing the size, I'm going to divide the smaller number, which is the size of the photocopy, by the bigger number, which is the size of the original. And that's going to give me a decimal point. That decimal point can be translated into a percentage, right? So if it's 0.5, that's 50%. If it's 0.25, that's 25%. If I had some artwork that was small and I wanted to expand it to a certain size to fit the full space of my page, I would want to reverse what I'm dividing. So I would want to divide the dimensions. I would want to divide the larger number, which is the size of the zine, by the smaller number, which is the size of the original. And I would get something like 1.5, which would be 150%. So you'd want to enlarge your image by that much. In this case, we are reducing our image. We're making it smaller. So I've got 2 options, right? There are 2 different dimensions for each of these objects. So I can divide the length of the zine, or the height of the zine, by the height of the original. And that will give me a percentage. But what that is also going to do, because 8.5 by 11 does not actually scale down perfectly to 5.5 by 8.5, is if I were to just make sure that that it fit height-wise onto this zine, then I would actually get a little bit of the original cut off on the zine, and that's not good. Alternately, if I divide the width of the zine by the width of the original, the height of the photocopy is going to be smaller than 8.5, the height of the zine. So I'm gonna have a little bit of like extra space down here, extra white space. And you might be thinking, hey, dummy, like why didn't you design your zine to fit onto the pages of the zine that you wanted it to be? And the story is that I actually did design it for a different sized zine that was smaller than this, that was 4.5 inches wide by 5.5 inches tall. So it was this perfect like 50% decrease of the size of the pages. And I made some and I shared them with people and everybody was like, this is kind of tough to read, dude. So I went back to the drawing board and I reformatted it so that it would fit on 8.5 by 11 folded in half, this 5.5 by 8.5. So yeah, that happens sometimes. But that's one of the benefits of self-publishing is that you can sort of make a few copies, share them with friends, and if somebody's like, this is kind of weird, or like, these pages are out of order, that's helpful. You can then, like, on your next batch, make something different, change things around. So my options are to cut off part of the width of the original, or to, thanks. Or to leave a little bit of a blank space. And I think having like a blank space down here is a lot better than having some of the artwork cut off. So I'm going to make it smaller. So I'm going to divide the width of the page, which is 5.5, by the width of the original, which is 8.5. This gives me 0.647058823529412, which is way too big of a number to deal with. So actually, all you have to worry about is those first two digits in the decimal, because we're trying to find a percentage that we're supposed to reduce it to. So in this case, it's 0.64. 5.5 divided by 8.5 is 0.64, which translates to 64%. So now I can find out how tall my reproduction is going to be by multiplying 11 inches by 0.64. That's going to give me 7.04. So roughly about 7 inches. So the amount of space that's going to be blank at the bottom of my zine is 1.5 inches. So I'll probably just chop that off, cut that off. So I'm going to take them now to a photocopier. You might have access to a photocopier at an office. There are, like shipping and copy businesses that have photocopiers. A lot of libraries have photocopiers that you can use to make copies. Your home might even have some sort of like copy printer combo machine. What I have today is a cardboard box that I have imbued with the imaginary powers of being a photocopier. So we're going to pretend that this cardboard box is a photocopier. So every photocopier is different. Can't have a photocopier without a little keypad, right? Every photocopier is different, so you're going to have to do a little bit of trial and error when it comes to like how to do the things you want it to do. And error is a very important terminology to keep in mind, because I have made a lot of photocopies in my life, and I have always found that that I'm making mistakes. I've gone to a photocopy place and made photocopies and made mistakes far more often than I've gone to a photocopy place and not made mistakes. So, but that's okay. We're going to do small batches. So you're going to when you make mistakes, it's not going to be a big deal. So I'm going to place an original face down on my photocopier, and you're going to find that photocopier beds, a lot of them have a little arrow that tell you where to put the corner of your paper. So I'm going to place it face down, and I'm going to like close the top, and now I'm going to go to my keypad, and I am going to find the reduce option, which here is called copy ratio. So I'm going to push copy ratio. I'm going to get this little display of the copy ratios. So with photocopiers, you can reduce the size, and there's some presets here to reduce the size. You can also do it by pushing these buttons. You can type in the number that you want. You can also increase the size. So you can go up to 400% if you want. So what did we say? We said we wanted 64%. So I am going to push 64 and just so there we go. We're at 64%, and I am going to make that copy. And so it makes this photocopy, and then it's going to spit out a reduced size, right? And you can take a ruler and measure to make sure that like it's going to fit to 5.5 by 7. So I've got this new copy of the original. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to look at it and like make sure that like everything's dark enough. Make sure that like there's not a bunch of like dirt and grime on it. Like sometimes photocopier beds don't get cleaned very often. So you want to like make sure that you're happy with the way it looks. Did anything get cut off? Photocopiers have this tendency to cut off the margin all around a piece of paper. So if you don't like how it looks, you can recycle this or use this as scrap paper and like make another copy, adjust it. You're like, oh no, I need to like wiggle this. I need to like, actually, it seems like maybe I need to change it from 64% to 63% to really fit into the space. So use, make your copy and then like check your copy, see if you need to make any adjustments. Oftentimes, if you make a mistake and you have now 2 copies of the same page, you're going to want to find a way to make sure that you like know which one is the good one. Like maybe like make a little tear in the one that's not good, or fold it in half, or like actually put it in the recycling right away if you're not going to keep it as scrap paper. But I'm pretty happy with this photocopy. So I'm just going to photocopy the rest of them. And I'll have like a stack of these originals. So I'm done with the photocopier for a second. You probably only need like 1 copy of each of these, but maybe you want to make 2 just in case you screw up. So now I'm going to cut out my copy. So now I have this ready to like put on my primary sheets. So let's get our primary sheets going. So the first thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to move this out of the way. I've cut out all of my originals, or all of my photocopies that have been reduced by 64% or to 64%. What I'm going to do is on the back, I'm going to write down what page this is. So this is the cover, very lightly in pencil. I'm just going to write things down. This is the inside cover. And now this is page 1. You want to make sure that they stay in order. Page 2, page 3. It might be helpful if you're like while you're drawing, if you want, you can actually write the page number on the comic that you're drawing. That could be helpful. So this is page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. This is the inside back cover. And then this is the back cover. All right, so I'm going to grab some blank sheets of 8.5 by 11 paper. I actually had folded these 4 before to show you like the dimensions, right? So I'm just going to use these 4 sheets of paper. This is going to be the primary sheets for my zine. This is going to be the thing that I photocopy from to make copies of my zine. So here's where we get to the most confusing part. So I hope you're not confused yet, because this is where it really takes a left turn. We're getting into the zone of pagination. Pagination is the order in which the pages are laid out in a publication so that when the publication is bound, they are in the correct order. So, because if I just take like one sheet of this paper, and on this piece of paper, let me see if I can get this to look good. I write 1, and this is page 2, and then I'll just flip this over, and this is page 3, and this is page 4, and I'll take a second sheet of paper, and I'll say that this is page 5, and this is page 6, page 7, and page 8. If I stick these together, I'm going to get page, let me show you. I'm going to get page 2, followed by 3, and then 6, and then 7 and 8. Those are in the correct order. 5 and then 4, and then 1 all the way on the back. That doesn't make any sense. That's not right. So you have to figure out where the pages are supposed to go on this. Luckily, we have a pretty easy thing where because we have already like folded these sheets of paper into what looks like a booklet, we can just treat it like the zine because it is going to become the zine, just erasing these numbers. And so I've got my 4 sheets of paper, right? I'm turning them into a little booklet. So they're nested within each other. So if I open it up, there's like this center spread. So now on this folded up sheet of paper, I'm going to write cover. This is the cover. And then this is the inside cover. This is page 1. And I'm turning the pages like I would if I was reading this. 2 and 3. 4 and 5. 6 and 7. 8 and 9. 10 and 11. 12. This is the inside back cover. And now the back cover. So now I've marked each of these sides in this form. And if I take this paper apart, now I take these sheets apart, you'll see that I've got on this sheet, I've got pages 5 and 8 facing each other. And I've got pages 6 and 7 facing each other because that's the center spread. I've got pages 4 and 9 facing each other, 10 and 3. So this is going to tell me where I'm supposed to put each of my pages, because I would have absolutely no idea where to put these pages if I just like if it had these loose before, right? So now I know the order in which they're supposed to go. One way of confirming that you've done this correctly is each time that you do this, you'll find that all of the facing pages equal the same number. So it depends on how many pages you have. But in this case, with 12 pages, 10 and 3 equals 13. 4 and 9 equals 13. 1 and 12 equal 13. 2 and 11 also equal 13. So that's one way to confirm that like all the pages are in the correct spot. If everything equals 13 except for one pair, which for some reason equals like 12, then you've got an issue that you need to resolve and figure out. So, so now I've got these in order. I don't need to keep them in that zine shape, right? I can have them scattered around because I am now going to glue them to glue the photocopy pages, right? I'm going to glue them to their corresponding page number. And I have written the page numbers on the back of each of these copies. So it's going to be very easy for me to figure out what goes where. So let's see if I can play this weird backwards camera game. So that is page 1. So I'm going to find page 1. I like to use just like, liquid glue. I know some people like to use glue sticks. I have never liked glue sticks, and I can't tell you what I don't like about glue sticks, but they just really rub me the wrong way. But so here I'm just doing some pieces of little dots of glue around the edge. That's all you need. If you want, you can put more on the inside. I think people prefer glue sticks over liquid glue because it doesn't buckle the way that liquid glue does, because liquid glue is a liquid and it makes your paper buckle. So something to think about when you're laying out your page or like gluing your page to this primary sheet is that it's going to cut off a very thin edge. The photocopier always cuts off like a thin edge around the edge of your sheet. So you don't want any sort of precious artwork like right up against the edge, especially not writing, that sort of thing. So move this over. This is page 12. So I'm going to find page 12. So if you can use other things to adhere these photocopies to the paper, but if you joined us this past Tuesday for Jenny Robb's presentation on preserving your artwork and your legacy, things like rubber cement or any type of tape is non-archival and not good for preserving your artwork. So that's something to keep in mind. I honestly have no idea how archival or nice to my materials glue is, so who knows. So here we go. We got page 1, we got page 12 now glued on. And I'll flip it over and I'll do page 2 and page 11. So once you have your primary sheets all glued up, you can put them back together in their zine shape like this, and you can flip through them to make sure that they're actually, in the right order. It's very clunky and it does not look pretty, but that's okay. Let's go back to the photocopier. Hope everybody's having a good time. Almost there. Here we go. Photocopier is in place. Bring out the imaginary photocopier again. So I've got my primary sheets all pasted up. I've brought them back to the photocopier. So these, gotta always check to make sure that your originals are off the photocopier bed. Otherwise you'll lose them, and that will be terrible. So here we go. We've got our primary sheets, and because these are double-sided, I have to do some new settings with the duplex option. Here it's listed as two-sided, so I'll push that. And then we get this little card here. So most photocopiers have this like neat little thing at the top that's a feeder where you can just stick your papers right in, and it'll just suck the papers in and scan them real quick and spit them back out, and then it'll just give you some double-sided photocopies, and it's very easy and it's very nice. But because I've glued paper onto other sheets of paper on like both sides of other sheets of paper, that would totally jam up the feeder and make people very upset, particularly the people who own the photocopier. So so I'm going to have to do this by hand. I've got this fun little method I call the pancake method. So we've got some duplex options here. This one, the 2 sheets going to this little icon of 1 sheet with both sides exposed is indicating that you have 2 one-sided sheets and you want them to be 1 two-sided sheet. Alternately, you can photocopy from 1 two-sided sheet to another 1 two-sided sheet. So this is the one that I'm going to have to choose because this photocopier thinks that I am placing 1 copy on it at a time. So I'm going to select that option. And I'm just going to make 1 photocopy because you don't want to set your quantity to like 50 copies. Do this like weird method of trying to copy both sides of single sheeted stuff into a double sided set of papers and then like make some horrific mistake. And get like, 50 copies of this like 16-page zine, all with mistakes. You don't want that. So this is my method. I call it the pancake method. So I'm just doing 1 copy of this. I've got the I've got my primary sheets. I've got the center spread facing up. And there's never anywhere good to place it on the photocopier. So I'm going to open this up. I'm going to, every time that I move anything, I'm going to flip it like it's a pancake. So I'm flipping it on face down onto the copier. I'm going to close it. I'm going to hit this green button and it's going to scan it. It's not going to print anything because it thinks that we're taking one-sided pieces of paper and putting it on 2 sides. So it only scanned this. So I'm going to open this up. I'm going to flip it like a pancake, close it. I'm going to hit that start button, and then it'll scan the second side. It'll have done 2 scans at this point. At this point, some photocopiers will, if you're just doing 1 copy, will spit that 1 sheet out, and you can check it and make sure that it's correct. But some of them will just wait until you're done photocopying everything. So I am then going to flip this again and put it somewhere on the other side of the photocopier. And at this point, the side that was facing up originally is now facing down. So all of these are just gonna like stack on top of them when they're done. So I'm gonna take another one, I'm gonna flip it, close it, hit the green button. That's 3 scans now. I'm gonna flip it again, close it. I'm gonna hit that, that's 4 scans. I'm going to flip this again, so it's face down. I'm going to flip this 3rd sheet, hit the green button. That's 5 scans. Now, if something happens now and like my phone rings and I go off and I'm like distracted and I don't know what's going on, and I have a phone call and then I come back like 5 minutes later and I look at this and I'm like, oh no. Was I in the middle of scanning this? Did I hit it? Did I scan it? Did I not scan it? Which side did I scan? You can check to see how many scans it's done. If the number is odd and you're doing a 2-sided thing, that means only half of the thing has been scanned. So, right, we did 5 scans. So that means I need to do another scan of this sheet in order to have a photocopy both sides. So I'm going to hit that thing. We've got 6 scans now. Flip it again. Flip the final sheet onto the bed. I'm going to close it, hit it. That's 7 scans. I'm going to flip this again, hit it. That's 8 scans. Flip this again, And now the pages of your primary sheet are in the exact same order they were when they were on the first side of your photocopier. And then a lot of photocopiers, once you've scanned all of the pages that you need, will give you a prompt to hit the pound key or some other button to indicate to the machine that you are done scanning, and then it'll print the stuff out. So photocopied these, and I got these photocopies in return. And I'm gonna like sort of like lightly fold them and make sure that they are in fact in the same order and everything's like facing up the right way and nothing's cut off on the margins. I'm going to inspect it to make sure that I like actually have what I want. So I have my primary sheets. I have this first photocopy from the primary sheets. I could fold this up and cut this white part off and staple it, and then I would have a beautiful zine. I'd be very happy about that. But I could also, if I wanted, use this now as my new primary sheets. And the reason I might want to do that is because, like I said before, you've got the pancake flipping method, which is ripe for mistakes, or I can just stick this two-sided stack of photocopies that I know are in the correct order, and I can hit this two-sided to two-sided and hit start, and it's just gonna suck them in, scan them real fast, spit them back out, and then give me another copy of my zine. So that's an option. I can use that first copy of the primary sheet as a new primary sheet that's easier to photocopy. Now the problem with that, the only thing that like makes things, would make me not want to do that, is because every time you make a photocopy of a photocopy, the image degrades a little. So that's something that you have to factor. Like, am I okay with that degradation? Do I notice that degradation? So yeah, that is what you have to think about. So now you have the option to make a bunch of copies, right? So you could change this quantity to whatever amount you want. I usually do bundles of like 10 or 20 copies at a time. But if you're making multiple copies, there's one more option that you have to think about, and that's the finishing, the sorting, or the stacking. So if your pages are in a particular order, you have these two options. Stack, as the icon indicates, will give you a stack of the first sheet, and then a stack of the second sheet, and then a stack of the third sheet, and then a stack of the fourth sheet. And you will have to physically collate, which means to put in order, those sheets of paper. The other option is you can hit this sort button, and it'll give you a stack of pages 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the order in which you photocopied them. And then it'll give you another stack of pages 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then another, and another, and another. And you could just take 4 sheets off the top, fold it, cut it, staple it, and then you'll be saving a lot of time. So if your pages are in the correct order, then you can hit that sort button, and it makes your life a lot easier. So I'm done with the photocopier now, and I've got this stack of like 10 copies of Demystifying Comics, and I am going to fold them. So when you fold your zines, always make sure that the corners are matching. You can use your thumb if you want to fold your zine. Now I've got this like pretty little zine. But that can hurt after a while if you're using a lot of, if you're folding a lot of these. So there's this tool called a bone folder. It's made sometimes of plastic, sometimes of bone. And this is a device specifically for folding paper. So maybe I can show you over here on the camera too. Here's the bone folder. And you just basically like scrape it along. And it makes a really nice clean fold. If you don't have a bone folder, a spoon works fine. You do Another one with a spoon. Tablespoon, teaspoon, either of them work fine. See, this one is folded, great too. So now, because I do have this like 1.5 inches of white here, I am gonna cut it off. I'm gonna, if you are at a copy shop, there probably will be a paper cutter that you can use. Paper cutters are gigantic knives, so please be careful with your paper cutters. Always know where your fingers are. Any paper cutter that you have access to is not designed to cut a bunch of pieces of paper at once. It's designed to cut a straight line. So don't shove like 10 sheets of paper in there and make a cut, because you're going to mess up the blade. You're going to make whoever owns that blade angry, and you're also going to mess up your zine. It's going to leave like a jagged line. You can also, a lot of copy shops have guillotines in the back that are much bigger and can cut a bunch of pieces of paper all at once. You can hand your copies over to the person working there, and they can like do it themselves. You can also just use some scissors. I am going to do that because I'm at home and I don't have a paper cutter. So I'm just going to cut very carefully. It's never going to be completely straight. If you fold your zine in half first, you've got less surface area to cut, so you have less of a chance to make really weird wavy lines. But here's the zine. And the only thing left to do is to bind it somehow. I have what is called a long arm stapler, and it's a stapler that actually has a really long arm that can reach here, because a normal office stapler will not do that. But you might not have that, and when I started making zines, I did not have it either. So I made the decision. I went on to the internet and looked up options for binding your zines that did not involve staplers. And I saw some tutorials on thread. So I started using thread to bind my zines. And that was what I started with. And that's actually my preferred method still, is to use thread on my zines. So I am going to thread this needle real quick. And tie a little knot at the end. So I am seconds away from being done with this zine. And I have not necessarily been looking at the time, but now is a great time. If people have questions, you can raise your hand in the participant section of the Zoom screen. So I like to start my threading of my sewing of the spine of the zine from the inside, because the knot at the end that keeps the thread together is on the inside. It looks a little cleaner from the outside. So I'm going to do, with bigger zines, I usually do 7 holes. With smaller zines, I usually do 5 holes. If you have questions and you don't feel like asking the question verbally, you can type it into the chat. And let me ask, so we have Fereshta Tusi helping us with the chat today. Thank you, Fereshta. Do I have questions? Is my question for the moderator.
AJ asks, what are your thoughts on Big League Bubblegum?
My thoughts on Big League Bubblegum. I think gum is one of the most disgusting things in the world. I cannot chew bubblegum, and I have a lot of trouble being around people who are chewing bubblegum audibly. So But I think that the idea of a bubblegum zine, as is being suggested in the chat, would be amazing, because I don't have to chew it. I can just read it.
How did you come up with the name Radiator Comics?
When I was trying to come up with the name, the idea behind Radiator Comics, primarily as a distributor of comics, is the idea that I'm like radiating out the goodness of comics. So, trying to get comics into other people's hands. There's also, when I was growing up, I was a very clumsy child. I was constantly going to the emergency room, and on 2 separate occasions growing up, I went to the emergency room because I was running recklessly in the house, and I tripped and flew through the house and smashed my head into a radiator. A different radiator on each occasion, and so it's always kind of been a little bit of a joke as to why I'm a weirdo in my family, is that because of the early encounters with radiators. So here is the bound zine. It's done. Here we go. Hooray!
Aaron asks, what's the max number of pages you would use for a zine?
That is a great question. I think that's a question that is debated by a lot of people. Like, when does a zine stop being a zine? When does it become a book? I really think it's up to you. A zine can be 1 sheet of paper, right? You can make a zine with just this sheet of paper. It can be, there's a cover, 2 inside pages, and a back cover, or a 3rd page, right? Or you can have your zine be 100 pages, right? Like, who is to say that that is not your zine? If you wrote it and produced it yourself, the more pages that you get, the hairier it gets to bind it. But there are some options. You can also, there's a debate as to whether or not, if you send the files off to a printer and the thing comes back, is that a zine because you didn't physically go to a photocopier? Maybe it's not a zine, but maybe it's still really awesome. So yeah, I think, the page count should be whatever fits the need of the content of the thing, and not worry what other people say about your zine. Do I have copies of some of the first zines that I've ever made? I think so. I have been a big fan of photocopiers for a long time, and so I have what I think is the first zine that I've ever made, which was a little poem that I wrote for a friend of mine for their birthday, that I then illustrated. And I have a copy of that. I don't have multiple copies of it, but I was like photocopying single sheets of comics by friends of mine before then. So maybe that's the first zine that I ever made, but I don't have any of those. So yeah, that's my answer for that. Any other questions? Well, thank you everybody so much for spending part of your Saturday. I did want to mention that there are more programs coming up through Radiator Comics Studio. So this Tuesday, we're doing a release event for Spiny Orb Weaver, which is a publication that Radiator Comics put out. We sent it to a printer. So is that a zine? I don't know. It sure feels like a zine to me. But we'll have Tana Oshima and Miss Jaws presenting their comics. I'll be talking with them and we'll answer your questions about the publication. That's this Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you go to Radiator Comics Studio, radiatorcomics.com/studio, you can see that information as well as information for all other events, including in 2 weeks when Summer Pierre will be doing an event like this, demonstrating how she makes her daily diary comics. And that's going to be really awesome too. So check out radiatorcomics.com/studio for all of those events. And thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Have a safe weekend.
Weekend.
Oh yeah, please tell us about your zines when they're ready.